What's up, guys? Today I'm going to tell you about the time I was detained, interviewed, quarantined, and nearly arrested when bringing my beautiful dog Molly over into Australia from America. And watch to the end to find out what happened after 7 hours of interviewing. So I was actually planning on moving to Australia, so obviously I wanted to take my dog with me, right? So I did some research, and it was very hard to find the information to figure out what to do exactly. So I did my research. I figured out you needed to have a microchip, rabies shots, bordetella, different shots and things of that sort. So I went to the vet, got all of those taken care of, had all my documentation, and I ended up flying on the airplane. My mom's a airline stewardess, so we decided to hop on the plane together. My mom, myself, and my beautiful dog Molly, and we actually were able to get onto first class. Now, we walked straight through security in America. We walked onto the plane, and she was able to come on first class with me, which was an awesome experience. She slept there over I think it was like 10 or 18-hour flight, something crazy, right? So we slept, and she was perfectly fine. Awesome experience. And airline stewardess were perfectly happy. Everyone was just, it was a great experience. And once I got off the plane, I got through the Australian border control. I got through the Australian, everything that they had to get through, picked up my luggage. And just as I was about to walk out, I'd probably say no longer than 10, 15 feet away, a random lady came up and was screaming, "Live animal, live animal, live animal." I was like, well, of course it's a live animal. It's a dog, right? She said, "Don't move, don't do anything." And I was like, my mom and I were like, whoa, what's going on here? So we stopped. The police and a bunch of other people, everybody from the airport ended up coming, and they locked down the entire international airport area where we were walking. The dog obviously had to go to the restroom. So I took her to well, first they put us in an interview room, and they detained us in an interview room with all of our luggage. They put Molly in a cage. Molly is my dog. They put Molly in a cage, and they had quarantine on it. It had yellow tape over it, and she was just locked up. Right. And my mom and I were just sitting there for an hour, 2 hours, as the people were outside discussing, making calls, trying to figure out what to do. And we had no idea what was going on. We thought everything was perfectly fine. I showed them the paperwork, and we were just really confused. Right. So after about 2 hours of just sitting there, no idea what's going on, they finally say, "Hey, we're going to have I guess you're not allowed to bring in a pet from America without having an Australian vet inspect it in America, and also when you land. And you have to get all these other tests and stuff. I guess they don't have rabies in Australia, so it's like a really big deal out there that there's nobody that has no animal has rabies out there. So I guess it's a pretty big deal. And I showed them that I had the rabies certificate, but they said it needs to be official from an Australian government issued veterinarian. I'm like, that's stupid, But I showed it to them. Then they had the Australian vet come and inspect it. And then I had to take Molly to go to the restroom, so I took her to the restroom in the airport. And they followed me with 2 police officers, rolled her in a little rolling thing as she was locked up in the cage. She was shaking. She was so nervous. And I took her. She went to the restroom, and they had 2 police officers outside. Then we had to put her back in the cage. And then they did a disinfectant where they sprayed the entire area. Then they locked off the area where the dogs go to the restroom. They locked it off. They put yellow tape, and the people were basically in bodysuits, had their masks on and everything, like we were infected basically. Then we went on the roller, went back to the room. They kept us in there. Then they had the Australian government interview us. They had a voice recorder, and they're like, anything you say and will, just like the movies. And they were asking me questions, basically interrogating me, acting like I was a terrorist, basically. Like, oh, did you know about this? And why did you do that? And who, what, where? And just asking a million different questions to my mom and I. And after asking a bunch of different questions, they're like, okay, fine. And then another person came in and interviewed us again. I was like, should I get a lawyer or something? And they're like, oh, we're just asking questions, whatever. And then they move us to another room, and I'm just like looking around the room, and they said, no, you have to stay in this area. And then they gave us like a little glass of water after like 4 or 5 hours of being there. And then they came back and they said that when they put us in the room, they had 4 police officers outside. And then somebody came in and asked us, something. And before they were about to leave, I thought for sure I was going to get arrested. They said that it's a $500,000 fine, and I'm going to basically be arrested, right? So I told them straight up, I was like, look, whatever you guys decide, you guys better be very careful with what you decide to do, because I'm not going to take this lightly, nor is my mom going to take this lightly. So you better be very, very careful at what step you take next, because this could go really south really quickly. So whatever you decide, just be very, very careful with what you do in your decision-making process. And they looked at me and then walked away. And then all of a sudden, like the police officers pushed open the door like they were going to walk in. And then that same lady that I said that to said something to them, and then they ended up walking off. Then they ended up coming back in. They said the Delta airline, they ended up coming in and interviewing us, and he was all angry and throwing a hissy fit and stuff like that. They ended up putting us in a hotel, and they said that you can either destroy your dog, like kill the dog, or send it back to America on the first flight in the morning. And we're like, you can't do that. And we talked and went back and forth. But long story short, they ended up putting us in a hotel, separate rooms, and Molly was locked up separate on a separate site. We couldn't be next to her. And then in the morning, I was going to go home with my mom, but then decided to just stay, and ended up deciding to stay and end up doing my trips. And my mom ended up going on the flight. They ended up waiting at the airport. They put the plane on hold. Nobody could enter the plane until my mom entered the plane with the dog. They put her in economy class all the way in the back. It was totally miserable for the dog. She was completely miserable, and it was really, really bad, right? And she flew home on an 18-hour flight in economy class, and that was miserable for her and my mom. And I decided to stay. The airline, Delta Airlines, got fined $500,000. And I guess this wasn't the first time. I guess Johnny Depp had brought his dog over, and the same thing had happened with him, and he got detained, and I don't know what happened to his dog, but it was a pretty big deal all over the news. So then luckily my dog ended up going back to America, and then I ended up going and continuing to travel throughout Australia. And it was a really horrible experience, and I was being interviewed for 7 hours, probably even longer, and they wanted to basically arrest me, detain me, fine me $500,000, and it was a horrible experience. But if you are planning on bringing a dog over to Australia, make sure you do extreme research and get it inspected by an Australian vet and go the whole 9 yards. The lady at the airline, she said that she's never seen a dog over in her whole 30 years of doing it. So be careful. Be sure to subscribe. Grab a copy of my book, How to Become an Experienced Traveler, where I go over all the different stories as well in there, and I have some great information for traveling that will help you guys become a really good traveler. And subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.